Welcome back, brothers and sisters. I am Braden. This is Langley Outdoors Academy, the place where we not only talk about what's going on in the gun world, but also how we're going to fix it together. And today, we're going to talk about what's upcoming this week in Oregon. Now, Measure 114 was the new hotness after the last election in November, and Oregon was bragging and boasting around the fact that they were the toughest gun regulations in the entire United States until they got smoked at a state level by a judge who you're going to think is very familiar in 1 second because it is coming back around again. The actual court date is approaching this week, and we are going to break down everything right now. Everything is linked in the description box below, and I can't wait to hear from you guys and send this one out so we're all aware of what's going on. And of course, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn the notification bell on. We are driving the Second Amendment every single day, twice a day, and we'd love to have you along for the ride, and thank you for that consideration. All right, my brothers and sisters, so as I mentioned, today we are going to talk about Measure 114, the Oregon ballot measure of gun control extraordinaire. And for the source that I've got an article from the AP, but I want to dive in to our returning sponsor, Ground.News. You guys responded so well. They are back, and I think it's an amazing benefit, and I love to have them on. So check this out. This is the article we're talking about. Oregon judge to decide in new trial whether voter-approved gun control law is constitutional. Now, we're going to go into the details in a second, but Ground.News has it as it's independent media, it's high factuality, and it's leaning left. That's the ranking that the system gives them. Now, if you look at this topic in general, 24 different sources are covering this. If you look at the bias distribution, which to me is one of the greatest things about this, it shows you it's in center left, mid, and mid right. Or center right. This information tells you the story behind the story. They are looking to hold the media accountable, which is why I've partnered with them, and they're a fantastic option if you're looking to get a little bit more clarity on what you consume. Check it out, ground.news/Langley. There's a link in the description box below. You can get 30% off around $5 a month of their Vantage subscription, and I hope you take it up. And now, let's get into this, and thank you to them. I love having them on board. Okay, so as I mentioned, I showed you the article in question. Well, here's the summation, and I'm going to show you something that might remind you of something. Check this out, because you guys are on it. Now, this came out today. Portland, Oregon, and an Oregon judge is set to decide whether a gun control law approved by voters in November violates the state's constitution in a trial that started Monday. Now, there's two things I want to hit on really heavily here before we get into the Oregon. One, this is a state level. There's federal and there's state. The federal one is with the Judge Immergut, who did the mental gymnastics, who just made it her own and said it was constitutional. And then there's the state one. The state one is what we're talking about here. This is under a judge named Raccio. This is massive because he granted a TRO in December of last year. We covered it extensively. Well, wouldn't you know it? Funny enough, the court date's coming. It's the exact same guy. This is key because prior, he had already granted a temporary restraining order saying you can't enforce this because it's an infringement. Well, now we're going to get an entire court hearing. Okay, let's get into this. So here's from December 8th. Harney County judge temporary blocks Oregon firearms measure. The Oregon Department of Justice intends to dispute that ruling, but for now, sales will proceed. That was back in December of 2022 when it got stuff. Here's what happened at that time. A Harney County judge on Tuesday issued a temporary restraining order that halts a voter-approved firearm measure from going into effect Thursday. The order by Circuit Court Judge Robert Raccio came in response to a lawsuit filed last week by Gun Owners of America based in Virginia and a related organization, the Gun Owners Foundation, along with Joseph Arnold and Cliff Asmussen, two Harney County firearm owners. The lawsuit seeks to block Measure 114, which will ban the sale of high-capacity firearm magazines, and put a permit system in place for firearm purchases that requires buyers to undergo a training course with law enforcement certified instructor. So this is bad on many, many, many levels, but it's under a TRO right now. The exact same judge who granted the TRO and said it was likely to succeed on the merits for the plaintiffs is now going to hear the exact same case. You see what's actually in balance here. This is not federal. This is state level. But now, that's where we've been. Let's go back to now because this is just a reminder of what AP is covering. The law requires people to undergo a criminal background check and complete a gun safety training course to obtain a permit to buy a gun. It also bans high-capacity magazines holding more than 10 rounds. And this is fascinating because what the state is going to do is they're going to try to split hairs and say that, well, you don't need 30-round magazines to defend yourself. You could have a 10-round magazine to defend yourself. It's not constitutionally protected. That's one of the angles that they're going to go. Never mind the whole idea that you have to have a permit to have the privilege of a right that you have. So they put one of your rights behind a permitting scheme which decides if you do or do not get your firearm. That's the whole point of why they allowed it federal. With the Judge Immergut, she said that, well, there's plenty of shall issue or may issue regimes, and it's perfectly fine because it's the exact same. It's a little bit different because that was concealed carry. She's talking about firearm ownership, which is clearly a violation. Now, the reason that this is so big is because if this falls right here in the Oregon state level, you've now got basically conflicting decisions. You've got state level that says no, you've got federal that says yes. It's going higher. Now, if you go even and extrapolate even further, they've pushed the ball too far because if you look at an FOID from Illinois, you have to have a FOID to have the gun. Okay, well, that would be a license to own. That's where they got the idea from. But if they go too far on that, it now calls their gun control into question. Just like the New Mexico sensitive places ban that now has taken place calls New York and California sensitive places into question, same thing. The theme is showing up again and again and again that the more that they push this, the more egregious the infringement, the more it's going to ruin the party for all the other gun controllers. That's why this is so big. Now let's continue. Because here's what they're saying. This case is not about public health, public safety, or public concerns, said Tony Aiello, Jr. This is about the individual right to self-defense and the right to bear arms. 100% agree. The defense, here comes the defense, said that the law doesn't unduly frustrate individual rights and represents a reasonable legislative response to public safety concerns, such as mass situations. Well, the only problem is that's not correct. They're trying to hide behind the idea that it's not so infringy by saying it's not so infringy, meanwhile infringing. That's the whole point. They're doing extreme infringement on the actual face of the law. They don't have the permitting scheme in place. They don't have any of the answers. All they're going behind is, well, it's reasonable, and it doesn't really frustrate it. It just kind of irritates it. Very similar, again, going back to the New Mexico governor, this isn't a permanent ban. This is just a suspension. They can call it whatever they want, but they're getting into splitting hairs and saying different words at different times to try to get past the courts. This is where we meet them. Now, one more thing for you. The plaintiffs also expressed concern that Oregonians may face long wait times to obtain the permit they need to buy a gun. The defense said the process wouldn't take longer than 30 days. Now, draw back to the New Mexico verbal decision that was given by the judge last week. Remember how he cited the case that said a temporary infringement is still unacceptable because it's still an infringement upon the rights? Rights cannot be infringed in a short term or a long term. The time frame doesn't matter. They just can't be infringed. Sound familiar? These things are all interwoven, and that's why we cover this with such nuanced detail every single day, because as we get these things under our belt, they keep on coming up, and battle for freedom continues, and that is what I've got for you guys. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. I will keep you updated as this goes forward, and I hope you have an amazing night. Let me know what you guys think. I'll see you on the next one.